Beautiful. Are you going to clap?
Well,
yeah, go on. Okay. I'm joined here today by Anna from Outside Play Therapy. It's like a double Anna there.
Yeah.
Who we're hoping to build a partnership with Limitless Learning to help our community with some play therapy, which fits lovely within our brand. But we did want to go through some questions that often come up, frequently asked questions, so that it helps people that are interested have a better understanding of what there is to offer. And then hopefully with those questions being answered, we'll be able to put an offering out. Is the main goal, isn't it, Anna?
Absolutely. Yeah. Should we get going?
Yeah, let's get going. So should we start with something simple, like what is play therapy?
Well, is it simple?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I don't know. And what is the main misconceptions that might come up?
Okay, so play therapy is a scientific backed form of psychotherapy. Play therapists in general are level 7 trained. So it's a step above your generic interventions that you might get in school. But the main misconceptions, I guess, is in the name. I think a lot of people hear the word play and just assume that they're sat playing with a therapist on the floor and that nothing else is really happening. And when I hear that, I get an image, the image that you see online of an iceberg, what you see above the surface and what you see below it. And I think what you would see above the surface is a child or a young person playing alongside a therapist. But the things that go on underneath run really deep,
yes.
are really grounded in science, and there's a lot of it.
Definitely.
I think I mentioned to you before, it's like having 100 tabs open in your mind at the same time. But some of that is like co-regulation and modelling regulating to support with emotional regulation. Another thing that we do is we track the themes in the play, and it tells us what happens in the subconscious of the person, tells us what some of the struggles they might see, because it all comes out in whatever they do in the room.
So I think what you've led into quite nicely actually is like the main principles perhaps of play therapy. Are there any others that underpin the provision?
We are trained in 8 main principles, and I'm not going to list them all.
Wow, that's a huge amount, really.
Yeah, but Virginia Axline is the person who's put these principles down, invented the method back in the 60s, and it's tweaked and evolved since then. But the main underlying principle is that it's all focused on the child, and the child leads the process. And when I say child, I mean child, teen, preteen, young adult, whoever that might be. But yeah, they lead the session. So in school or in learning situations, very much it's the adult has an idea or an intention for the day, and they put out an activity for them to complete. That's not what happens in play therapy. The child comes in, and especially when we're talking about people who have gone through specific trauma or have significant need, the last thing that we want to do is re-traumatize them by forcing them into going into that deep stuff straight away.
Definitely.
So we guide them through whatever it is they want to bring up for that session, and then we respond to whatever it is they're ready for that time. So there might be occasions where they're ready to go in really deep, and times when they just can't because they're at capacity. It was very much led by the child and ethics and confidentiality.
Definitely. So in terms of what a session could traditionally look like, I know obviously you're saying it's child-led and that sort of thing, but is there like an example in your brain, without obviously spilling names out and stuff like that, but you could offer us to show us the process that you might go through as part of a session?
I can give you a few examples. It's very, very different depending on the child. So we generically there would be a room, and it doesn't really matter where the room is or what's in it. We'd stock it full of miniature symbols. It can be animals, there can be all sorts of mythical creatures. We've got art materials, music, drama, props. There's so much like sporting stuff. Like there's literally anything you could possibly think of. We build a kit from that, and the child enters the room. And I think the main difference that they notice straight away is that the boundaries are really slim. There's boundaries for safety, and there's boundaries for breaking things.
Yes.
But other than that, they are at free will to do whatever it is they do within the time frame. And they look at you like, really? I can do anything and I don't have to tidy up.
Oh, bless them.
So it takes some of them quite a long time to get into the habit of that. Science tells us it takes about 6 to 8 weeks generally to form a therapeutic relationship with a therapist, but depending on a child's circumstances, that can take a lot longer if they're from an adopted background or a looked after child, for instance. It might take significantly longer to build that relationship. So they would come in and they explore all sorts of things, and I think in the first part of the process you tend to see them looking around everything and just dipping their toe into whatever might come up for them, whatever they're drawn to. Sometimes it's Lego, sometimes it can be all sorts of things. I mean, from the first session, they're already showing you what's going on internally. And I think the beauty of the process is that they don't necessarily know that they're going through therapy.
Yes.
They need their consent. I generally do tell them that this is what play therapy is.
Yep.
But as far as they're concerned, they're in a room and they're playing.
Yeah,
and it's
definitely.
me that kind of looks at the themes that might crop up in that. And then I might reflect back gently. I've noticed that in these situations you struggle with this, or that in these situations this might come up for you. And they can either accept that offering, or they can decline it and carry on and stay within metaphor and stay in the unconscious part of the brain and just work through it that way. And I've had children come in and not speak for 45 minutes across 6 months, and they make so much progress. And the one child that I'm thinking of particularly was avoiding school, would have huge meltdowns at the school gate, not even going in. The class teachers quite often said that the child was fine when they were in school. They didn't notice that there was anything going on. But as soon as they came back, there'd be this huge escalation, this huge meltdown lasting 2 or 3 hours. Sometimes they'd even have to take the child to another place like their grandparents' house just to stop the meltdown, because it would just keep escalating. And it was the only way they found that would,
soothe it
and change the place and the space in the mind. And over 6, possibly 9 months, she played out. I'm being really careful here.
Yeah, I know you are. Yeah,
yeah,
of course.
So through the process, they managed to rewrite some of that stress and anxiety and the trauma that they went through, having to mask all day, every day, poses a significant amount of stress on their brains. And I think you do get to that point where they just break down from the exhaustion of it all.
Definitely.
So even though they might present as okay at school, if there's that much significant stress when they get home,
it's like a can of pop, isn't it?
Absolutely,
like
shake it. But it's really hard when you get the two contrasting pictures. Quite often I've seen in schools that there's a lot of parent blaming, especially when it's hard for them to come into school and they start school avoiding. It's a really difficult position to be in, but I have found that play therapy does help with that, and it gives them the opportunity to process some of the trauma that they've been through in that process.
I liked what you said in terms of you ask for consent, but equally it's so different that they almost don't feel like they're in that sort of therapeutic setting.
Yeah, it's so gentle, and I think that's the beauty of it really, is the process shapes itself to the child and their needs. It's bespoke for everyone. See how many children, some will come in and they're really conscious and they're really stressed and they're really anxious, and you see them relax into the metaphor and doing it indirectly. So rather than this is the situation that's happening to me, it might be the situation that's happening to this meerkat, and his social relationships are just awful, and it's easier to deal with when it's almost in that kind of second person. It's like happening over there, like away from me.
Yes.
And then other children are the other way around. They come in so far in metaphor that you almost need to bring a little bit of consciousness to it. But it's so bespoke down to every single person that it's really hard to say that this is what the standard is. But as an absolute minimum, our play therapists are bound to ethics, and we say around 12 to 16 weeks would be the absolute bare minimum. Yep. And then science says that some of the good stuff happens around 30 odd weeks. But again, it's very different depending on the child and their needs and their experiences.
Yeah, it sort of evolves as you go through, doesn't it? Know when you're in the process how to direct it or how often it should be or whatever. I remember you saying as well that you do a lot of outdoors stuff as well. Yeah. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that as well, that sort of side of things? So I know that we mentioned about being inside, but I just didn't know what it looked like if you were outside.
Yeah, thanks for that. Traditionally, play therapy does take part inside, and some children need the kind of room to have them almost hemmed in so they feel like it's contained and safe.
Yes.
And then some children are so sensory aware that the experience of being outside is quite soothing. Like you feel the wind on you, it's quite tactile, you get the ground underneath you. I've heard so many parents tell me that their children like different people when they're outside. And it's noticing that and seeing the kind of different experience that they get in the outdoor space that's made me want to almost specialise in that kind of field. Quite often people say, well, their child's different when they've been swinging, and there's so much science in the kind of rhythmic movements and the regulation that goes on when you're outside. So yeah, it's something that I'd like to diversify into, and it's evolving all the time. But the experience of having nature outside through the therapeutic session, I'm hoping means that when these children become adults and they start to get overwhelmed at work or stressed, they've learned that I know what to do, I will go outside, and I've learned that this soothes me, and it's something they can access for the rest of their lives.
And for free as well.
And for free, rather than it being, I'm going to, insert any kind of unhealthy coping mechanism in that space, but they've learned already that this is what I do to calm myself, and I'll just go and sit on a park bench somewhere, or go and climb a tree, or whatever it might be.
I think I ended up hearing a statistic that, and I don't know how true this is, I haven't fact checked it, probably should have done, but I think they were saying going for a walk gives you 50% more serotonin or something. It was huge amounts, basically, just from being outside in nature, taking yourself for a walk. And quite often, that's why they go into recommending being out in nature.
I mean,
some
countries prescribe it, don't they? Instead of giving medication for things, they prescribe time outside.
Yes.
And I think naturally it gives us challenges as well. And like it gives you the opportunity to build that resilience. If it rains one day, what am I going to do? Because this is what I always do. And it's learning. I think the beauty of the process is learning that no matter what the adversity, no matter what the challenge, I know that I can come through it on the other side. And I think nature gives us so many opportunities for that.
Yes.
Whether it's wind and it's going to blow all your pictures away on a small scale, but you are learning to adapt and cope with when things go wrong, then it completely tipping you over the edge.
And things that are out of your control, and like there's no way of preparing for that as well, is there?
Absolutely. There's so much science. I mean, even just hearing birds is supposed to lower your blood pressure. The signals is that I'm safe. They're sending each other signals that there's no predators around. We're all safe. So when they're singing, it gives you the,
it's comforting again,
Absolutely.
isn't it? I think,
yeah,
which is lovely.
Yeah, there's so much science.
So I think we've covered quite a few questions so far, haven't we? You must see quite a lot of children with different needs, as well as obviously emotional needs. Is there any like scientific backing and of benefit of play therapy for those that might have SEND needs?
Yes, absolutely. So I think the science says that if you have an SEND need, that you are less likely to be able to emotionally regulate yourself. So the children that have those huge emotional outbursts that last well over 15 minutes, it tends to be that they have a smaller, what we call a window of tolerance. So if you just literally imagine a window and the things that are within that you're comfortable with, you can manage. It's adversity, but you can cope within it. Those things are comfortable. But anything on the outside of that would cause you to enter either your fight, flight, freeze response.
Yes.
So if you have an SEND need, it tends to be, and this is a very generic thing, it tends to be that your window of tolerance is smaller. And there's no kind of average size or whatever, but I think the experience of play therapy helps you widen that gradually.
Yes.
And it meets you where you're at, accepts you as you are. All the sessions are so bespoke that it doesn't really matter what kind of need you come in with. It's geared towards what you need and what you have. And no matter how you are in the room, it's completely accepted. And like I said, with time, and this is the thing with play therapy, it does take time, that you can generally widen that so that you can cope better with whatever might come up. And a metaphor that therapists tend to use is like having an airing cupboard. And if you imagine that when you put your things in the airing cupboard, all your life experience is screwed up and thrown in and it takes up a lot of space. But if you imagine pulling a piece out bit by bit through play therapy, having a look at it, folding it neatly and putting it back in, eventually you'd have more space to cope with all the things that don't go your way. Yes. Rather than being completely overwhelmed all the time, you've got a bit more tolerance and capacity to just cope with whether it's your sensory aversions or whether it's just being overwhelmed or overloaded, because we process so much information all the time, and I think those children with SEN are just more aware of that.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So you've mentioned there about some main benefits, particularly for SEND students. In terms of if we think about short-term benefits and then long-term benefits, could you go into a bit more detail around that?
I mean, they overlap each other, but short-term, when I say short-term, I'm talking 6 to 12 months.
Yes.
And then long-term would be like lifetime benefits, I guess. So in the short term, you'd see the children more able to communicate their needs, whether they do that through a metaphor initially with the therapist, that eventually does evolve into, right, my meltdowns, instead of being an hour long, now it might be 15 minutes. And after I've come down from that and after I've re-regulated myself, I can then communicate with my family at home what it was that started it, what it was that upset me, and then together they can work on we know that this is a trigger, so we can make that different, or it can just look different in different perspectives, whether that's with a school teacher, whether that's at home. If there's this specific scenario that sets you off, what can we do to support you in that situation? And I think having that communication and the child's perspective is really beneficial from that. Another thing would be the social interactions and the relationships. If they've had negative experiences in social situations, you might learn that is what happens, and you assume that's what's going to happen in all relationships. But what happens with the therapist is that the therapist kind of models a different type of relationship, a healthy one, a secure one, and a positive experience, which makes you go, oh, hold on. So I've had this bad experience, but this person's shown me something different. So you then don't just assume that's a copy and paste template that you can work on for the rest of your life, which then means that it opens up social opportunities for the young person. It also means that they're more likely to have healthy relationships because that's what's been modelled to them in the room.
Definitely.
So again, and the processing the trauma, like I said with the airing cupboard, whatever it is that they've been through, once it's processed, it almost kind of releases it from your body, so you're not carrying that around all the time, you're not carrying that weight with you. Things don't feel so difficult because you've almost let go of the experiences, and it opens you up to having more new experiences that are positive rather than just assuming that all things are bad.
I love a good analogy as well. It's always helpful to visualise the process. And I suppose, actually, I'm just thinking, I've had a hell of a lot of therapy myself in terms of as a child and then into adult life. But one session that does stick in my brain from childhood is, there's only one really that's stuck in my brain, because I remember just not wanting to talk to a lot of people, to be honest. But one therapist actually sat me down, there was a sandpit, and then there were lots of toys and
like
stuff like that. So and now looking back, I know that they were trying different strategies from like a play therapist point of view, probably. And I've still got the picture somewhere under my bed of what I created. And then we talked through, again, it's probably the one time that I opened up a bit more than previously. But I think maybe having that visual as well, for me, making things more visual made it a bit more tangible and understandable.
Absolutely.
So I think maybe this is just me interjecting from a personal perspective as well, that actually children with SEND like myself probably need something that's a bit different like that to be able to connect on a level. I mean, I compare it to journaling experience, but when you journal, it takes a really long amount of time. Sometimes you can't actually put into words the exact feeling. So you could say that I feel like I've got a volcano inside me might actually be more accurate than just saying you're angry, because it doesn't quite sound the same, does it, when you say I'm angry? Like having some kind of metaphor or some sort of symbolic representation actually has more depth and more meaning than words necessarily do. So with that sand tray experience, it's amazing how releasing it feels, and I've had to go through it myself for my supervision and for training, like just having all those experiences out in the sand, and then having someone ask you, well, let's turn the tray around, let's look at it from a different perspective. Does it look as intimidating, does it look as scary if we look at it from this side, or is there something you'd like to change about this scenario? Because then it's teaching you, well, actually, I don't like it when this person speaks to me like this, but then by being asked, what would you like to change? It's in a safe space. You can almost practice with your therapist. Well, I'd like to say this to them. Yes. And then if the child wants to go away and do that and initiate that change in their life, they can, because it's been almost, like we say, rehearsed within that safe space. Definitely. It's fascinating, really, isn't it? Like when you think about it on a level and then you go a bit deeper with it, it is fascinating. How would play therapy support parents in this scenario or in general, perhaps? It varies from family to family. I think some families want to really be involved in the process, and that's great. But I think the main change I think that I see is parents really start to understand that their child's behaviour is communication. It's that not that they want to break boundaries, it's not that they're being naughty, it's that they're trying to communicate something to you the only way they know how. And I think once you've had that kind of mindset shift and you start to explore in the review process with the therapist what those outbursts might mean, what it is that they're struggling with, it's almost like you start to see another level of depth of your child. And it's really validating having a professional actually tell you, I see the struggle, I can see it's there. Because I think sometimes, especially in school scenarios, if they're still able to learn and keep on top of learning, you get told that they're fine. There's nothing wrong, especially if they're masking quite severely into school. So to have a professional be able to stand there and say, no, actually, I really see these struggles. I can see where they're coming from. And to be able to advocate those needs, whether that's in an EHCP report, whether that's just working with the family to build strategies on how they can cope with things at home. It's a lovely process to see unfold. So every 6 to 8 weeks, I'd meet with the family and we go through updates of things that I've seen and what changes happening at home. We put two sides of the picture together, and that gives us an overall, like this is what we feel like is going on for this child and what can we do to help. Sounds brilliant. And then thinking from another perspective, how could a parent advocate for their child to have play therapy written into their EHCP? So whatever their EHCP targets are, I can write a little report or a paragraph or something to be sent into the caseworkers to say, this is why play therapy will help meet those targets. And if you don't allow them to have play therapy, that this is potentially what
it might look like if those struggles continue and they start to escalate more, this is what's potentially going to happen, and this is how it will eventually interrupt learning. And I think from my perspective, as long as there's targets there, it's easy to justify why play therapy will meet that need and will meet that target.
Cause and effect. Yeah,
it is. And the thing with my sort of bugbear with the EHCPs is it's all learning focused, and sometimes we just want the well-being of the whole child in there, and having to justify that against learning targets is, well, actually my personal passion is distinguishing the difference between surviving a system and actually thriving.
Definitely.
And especially when I think about my own kids, I often say, look, grades aren't everything. If you got straight A's or whatever, they're 9s now, like whatever it might be, if you haven't got the confidence to go into the room for the interview and actually say why you deserve the position, you see that quite a lot, then those people still don't get in the work because they can't access that part of themselves that goes, no, actually I deserve to be here.
It's like a book smart sort of thing, they say, don't they? But we see so many kids, obviously we have the alternative provision at Limitless, and we see so many children that actually, you're right, they're the local authority might be trying to encourage us to put in a learning programme. However, I always feel like the therapeutic aspect for some students is required before that point for them to even access that,
Absolutely.
But sometimes I think that's not always thought about as quickly as we need to make sure that they're learning. And I understand why they have to do that legally, and obviously every child is entitled to an education, but I just feel like you said, sometimes we forget that the therapeutic aspect is the thing that unlocks the other side of it.
Your memory and your emotions are stored in the same part of your brain. So if your emotions are clouding all that, you're never going to be able to access the memory part of it. But yeah, there's no written legal requirements for children's mental health at the moment. So it's another thing that I'm advocating for.
Definitely. It's huge,
outside of sessions. Like you say, education's written into law, but then the mental health stuff's not there yet.
Yes.
But I hope to see that happen. Hope to see that happen in my lifetime at least.
Fingers crossed. Just thinking if there's any other, because I think we've covered a lot of it. I'm just thinking from maybe an age perspective. Is there an age perspective that you feel that play therapy works best for? I know that at the start you'd mentioned it could fit a multitude of different ages.
Yeah. Well, I think it depends on the emotional age of the child. So it's not going on what it says on their birth certificate, but where they're at emotionally. And I think quite often when we've seen children go through trauma, they get stuck at a developmental age. So it's not where they're at chronologically. Yeah. And play therapy technically is designed for primary age children initially, but it's breaking out of those parameters now. And there are therapists who are now using play therapy with preteens and teens and young adults. There are people using it with like dementia cases. So it's across the lifespan, but what will happen is that we'll adjust whatever's in the kit in the room for the needs of that young person. So if there might be less doll's house play and actual toys, but then we might move more into art medium and sand tray symbolism and whatever it is. But equally, you can access whatever you want in that session. So if there's something that takes your fancy and you want to go back into something you did when you were a 9-year-old, it's okay, and the option's there and nobody's going to judge you for it.
Which is amazing,
interesting to see what comes out.
The other thing that I just remembered as I was chatting, because I know we spoke about how it could benefit parents, but I know that you help out at certain local schools as well. So how do you feel like your provision could potentially help local schools as well? Well,
I think from a school's perspective, which is always a learning perspective, there are always children that struggle within the school day. Schools typically have its own board and they look very different in different places, but if there are children who shout really loudly that they need support, and they're the ones that don't want to conform, the ones that are constantly seeking your attention, the ones that are possibly not able to cope in social situations and might hurt each other, those children really benefit from play therapy. But then so do the children who are described as daydreamers.
Yes.
The ones that aren't really there, or the ones who are learning but they're not necessarily accessing their full potential. And I've got a passion for both, really. There are children who definitely shout and they'd get the support they need. And if we're talking data, then I suppose what play therapy can do is avoid that child needing to be excluded later on in life, because if there's a struggle there, if someone doesn't intervene with that struggle, it's going to continue to grow and escalate. Because once you've got a belief about yourself that either you're not good enough, or that the people here don't like you, or that they aren't welcoming to you, that struggle's not going to go away by itself. There might be quiet periods, but it's still going to be there.
It becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way, doesn't it,
Eventually it does, yes. So I suppose unless a therapist does intervene gently with that belief, it's going to grow. And whether I suppose the science tells us that the sooner that we can intervene with that, the better for the child in the long term. Avoids the mental health breakdowns later in life because they've had that support early on.
So I've found this conversation super useful, literally as just an educator. So I'm hoping that the parent or whoever else manages to listen to it also finds it as rewarding. What would be the next steps if they did want to book in some time with you through us in our coordination?
Yeah. So the first things, I suppose, is signing a few forms. There's a couple of forms that I need to fill in, and I do a kind of parent conversation to get an idea of what the struggles are, and we set some goals together, and then I take that away and try and piece all the bits of information from my forms and from what they've told me, and possibly from a school's perspective or from the educator, whoever works here. And then we can start the ball rolling from there, really.
Sounds amazing. Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it, and I'm sure our community will definitely appreciate having just a better understanding of it, let alone then if they go on to book some sessions as well. So I'm really appreciative of your time today, talking through things and getting a better understanding and just educating people about what play therapy actually is. I think is so important, rather than just having a loose idea of what something is, and like you said, it just being viewed as a therapist is there and you're having a bit of a play. It's way more than that.
Absolutely.
And I think it can make a huge difference to so many children, or as you said, that it takes you up to all the way to adulthood as well. I think it's a super area that needs definitely more, what's the right word for it?
Exposure.
Yeah, exposure, yeah. So that people have that awareness of what's available and how powerful it actually can be. So I'm really glad that we did this today. So thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.